Thank you so much, Professor Wolf. Thanks to everyone for being here. It is my pleasure to be moderating this first session. My name is Francis Shen. I am a professor of law, faculty member in the graduate program of neuroscience, and co-chair of the Consortium on Law and Values here at the University of Minnesota. I have no relevant disclosures, but I am delighted this morning to introduce our first session on Research Ethics 2026, Advancing Ethics in a Shifting Landscape. We have great speakers to set the stage for today's conference, and we'll be analyzing emerging threats to research ethics as well as opportunities to meet those challenges and to make progress in the current landscape. Our speakers will bring multiple points of view. Dr. Christine Grady, who I'll introduce in more length in just a moment, brings a wealth of experience from NIH and bioethics, and Dr. Kirsten Bivens Domingo is the editor of the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, as well as a very talented physician investigator. Each speaker will present for about 20 minutes, and then it's your turn. So I want to emphasize that after each speaker speaks, it will be time for Q&A. How do you Q&A? As mentioned, you post those questions in the Q&A function on Zoom, and then even if you didn't write the question, or even if you did, you can upvote a question, and that will help me as moderator know what are the questions you really want to get to, and we'll do our best to get as many as we can, though we can't get to everything. All right, let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Christine Grady. Dr. Grady is former chief of bioethics and head of the section on human subjects research in the Clinical Center at the National Institutes of Health, NIH. She is a nurse bioethicist and a senior investigator who has published widely in the biomedical and bioethics literatures. She's co-authored or edited a number of books, including the Oxford Textbook of Clinical Research Ethics. I can speak from experience. I have had the pleasure of working with Dr. Grady on collaborative work and as a co-author. She is everything you'd want in a colleague. Her work has focused on the ethics of clinical research and the ethical issues confronting nurses and other healthcare professionals. Served from 2010 to 2017 as an appointed member of the President's Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues, and really is the dean of bioethics, one of the deans. She is a fellow of the Hastings Center and the American Academy of Nursing, senior research fellow at the Kennedy Institute of Ethics, and a member of the National Academy of Medicine, and has received multiple awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society for Bioethics and the Humanities. Dr. Grady has no relevant disclosures. She has a lot of insights to share with us this morning, and so please join me in welcoming Dr. Grady. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Francis. I'm going to share my slides and hope that I get them up right. So thank you for the introduction. It's great to be here with everybody on this important day. I have to start by saying my heart has held you close in Minnesota over the last few months. So although I'm not physically there, I'm with you. So today, in order to address the threats and opportunities for research ethics, it's helpful to review what is shifting in the landscape. So that's my task on this panel. I will say that it's amazing how much has happened in the last year or so. And so I can't be exhaustive and I can't go into depth on anything, but I'm going to attempt to take you through some of the recent and ongoing changes that I think do present threats and opportunities for research ethics. And my esteemed colleagues on this and subsequent panels will follow up with some of that. So first, in thinking about all the changes, I found that this quote from way back, Charles Dickens, hundreds of years ago, had some resonance. So I'm just putting it up here. I'm not even going to read it, but it is kind of a complicated time in our life. In the time that I have, I'm going to say a few things about what research ethics is, just to, again, set the stage, and then talk about 3 areas of shifting landscape, which I'll go through a little bit each. So research ethics. Hopefully every single person on this call knows what research ethics is, but it is the set of guidelines, regulations, norms, practices that guide researchers or reviewers and others who are interested in responsible and ethical scientific research. I think importantly, research ethics promotes the aims of research. It's essential to the aims of research, and it helps to establish trust among participants in research and the public. So it's a really important part of doing good research. And research ethics, as you may all be aware, encompasses a lot. It encompasses the responsible conduct of research, which includes many things like honesty and scientific integrity and proper mentorship, but also respect for and protection of human and non-human participants, and accountability and social responsibility. So the question for today is, how well does the guidance, norms, and analysis that research ethics provides us serve the purposes of today's research, given the many shifts? And that's what I'm going to try to set up. So the three areas that I'm going to talk about are on the slide. I think research ethics is affected by both the state of the science and science policies. Recent shifts present both threats and opportunities as we strive to maintain responsible and ethical research to help us understand health and the ability to intervene, while we're respecting and protecting participants, both human and non-human, and research collaborators, and maintaining public trust. So I want to start with some shifts in research methodologies, recognizing that none of these are absolutely new or future, but they are changing the landscape. So clinical trial methodologies, for example, have been shifting from a one-size-fits-all style of research to include more adaptive, decentralized, personalized, and AI-driven models. These approaches all aim to reduce the burden on participants, to accelerate drug development timelines, and to provide more precise data. But they all bring different challenges in terms of how we think about the research ethics. So adaptive trials, for example, allow for prospectively planned modifications, adjusting the dose or the sample sizes or dropping ineffective treatment arms based on interim data analysis without compromising the study integrity. One study that I had some consulting with was an active 2 study in the COVID pandemic, which was a platform trial that tested different treatments for COVID. And it was a platform study that built in the opportunity to drop interventions as they were shown to either not work or they were authorized through an EUA. Another example is decentralized trials. Again, not new, but something that we're seeing more of all the time. And this builds on the ability to have home-based diagnostics and telemedicine and wearables so that people can participate in clinical trials from where they live and not have to travel far. There's a couple of really interesting examples. The Apple Heart Study used the data from Apple iPhones, to see whether or not it was able to identify irregular heart rhythms like atrial fibrillation. And they had 500,000 people in that study to try to see it. Adaptable was a study that looked at different doses of aspirin in people who had heart disease to see which was the better dose to prevent heart attacks and stroke. And in that study, were identified through their electronic medical records, but then they used a portal to enroll, to sign up on their informed consent, and all the data was collected through the portal, and aspirin was bought by each individual on their own. Another type of methodology that's growing it's increasing, are these N-of-1 trials, developing and testing customized gene-targeted therapies for rare diseases or personalized approaches for cancer or other diseases. And these include things like the ASOs, the messenger RNA, and a number of different kinds of technologies that are allowing for, instead of a small amount of data to be collected on a large number of people, a large amount of data to be collected on on one or two people. In fact, recently the FDA, I think last week actually, announced a new pathway for individual ultra rare disease therapies for this kind of study, suggesting that a well-supported mechanistic rationale, what they call the plausible mechanism, plus natural history comparators might be sufficient to accelerate the approval of some of these therapies. It is interesting. Yesterday, Axios had an article that said the rare disease community is actually quite frustrated because a number of their applications have been recently rejected, despite this attention to accelerating approval. So we'll have to watch and see what happens in that space. Another kind of methodology that's being used more and more is in silico trials, which encapsulates a lot of different things using computer modeling and AI generated synthetic patient data. One of the kinds of in silico trials that I think is quite interesting and has gotten some attention in the neurospace is digital twins. And one of the interesting questions that I think we need to deal with in research ethics is research with digital twins human subjects research? And that's a really important question. Many people say it is. Of course, AI continues to revolutionize research. There are many, many studies that we see using AI-powered data analysis to analyze massive data sets, but also natural language processing and real-time adaptive designs using AI to boost speed and accuracy. And AI is also being used to automate design and protocol generation. These are interesting challenges and opportunities, I think, for speeding up some of the work that goes on, but also that we have to be able to pay attention to. Of note, the NIH posted as of September that they will not consider applications that are either substantially developed by AI or contain lots of AI in their parts. So there's another new methodology that's gotten a lot of attention in recent months, at least at the NIH. The NIH and FDA both announced in April of 2025 a new initiative to expand innovative human-based science while reducing animal use in research. And this is being referred to as NAMs, or New Approach Methodologies. The goal is to get human relevant and reliable and reproducible data without relying solely on traditional animal testing. This is consistent with the 3 R's in animal research: replace, reduce, and refine. And it includes a lot of different kinds of tools like organoids, organs on a chip, 3D cell cultures, and other kinds of methodologies. So what does all of these shifts in research methodologies mean for research ethics? Well, there are opportunities for efficiency, increased flexibility, decreased burden, less use of animal model, and more personalized treatment development. But we, as a community of people who care about research ethics, need to learn about and keep updated on these new methodologies, what the pros and the cons and the practicalities are of each one. Pay careful attention to the details, the accuracy, and the pathways. If things are coming to us from different pathways than we're used to, then we need to understand how they got there and whether or not they're how to understand the accuracy and the details of it. And I really think there's a great need for further analysis of the ethical implications of new methodologies and ethical guidance for new methodologies. And that's something the research ethics community should attend to. So in addition to methodologies, what else has shifted? Certainly you're all aware there's been a lot of changes in federal priorities, funding, and oversight. I'm going to just be able to touch on some of it. So certainly some of you have seen this article or set of articles, that were published in Science in November of 2025. And they were noting that in 2025, there was a proposal to cut billions of dollars of research funding from both NIH and NSF and other agencies. There were grants terminated, lots of grants terminated overnight. There were thousands of researchers fired or incentivized to leave. And all of these changes threaten universities greatly. And they noted in November the changes are already impacting public health, innovation, and economic prosperity in ways that will be challenging to overcome, even if funding is eventually restored. We know there were lots of changes in 2025. There was a reorganization of the Department of Health and Human Services and the addition of an entity called Make America Healthy Again. There was a closing of DEI programs across DHHS and across the government, really. There were cuts to the workforce, including from NIH, CDC, and FDA, myself included, with an estimate of 10 to 20,000 people leaving those agencies. There was an elimination of the Secretary's Advisory Committee for Human Research Protections. It no longer exists, and many changes to the Office of Human Research Protections, and many shifts at NIH and FDA. I'm just going to talk about some of them. So with respect to DEI, or Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Initiatives, as you may be very well aware, the White House issued an executive order in January of 2025, which terminated, DEI offices and programs, ended equity-related grants, and revoked affirmative action requirements for federal contractors. At the same time, or in response to this, numerous agencies and websites altered or removed material related to women, racial minorities, equity, transgender individuals, and many other things. This was a list of words that was circulated. I don't have a real sense of how accurate it is, but I can tell you that having been in the government at the time, when this list was circulated, there were lots of reactions to people were changing words in protocols on websites. I know at universities, people were changing words on applications. And the list of words is quite dramatic, but this was published initially by the New York Times, I believe, and used to terminate grants and programs, and had a lot of power, a lot of negative power. Interestingly, despite those things, inclusion of diverse and representative participants in research, and among researchers too, is vital for scientific excellence and social justice and global impact. And NIH and many of the other federal agencies have long been committed to broad inclusion of both participants in research, but also of diverse scientists. So some of the things that NIH has had, inclusion of women and minorities as a policy since the early 90s, inclusion across the lifespan, so that in human subjects research, people from little children to people who are elderly get included. There's been a movement towards this plans for enhancing diverse perspectives, which really initially came out of the BRAIN Initiative, which took on a life of its own and was included in a lot of requests for applications. And then there have been diversity supplements, which have been funded for many years, which have given lots of money to people to do really good work across a wide range. The current NIH website still talks about these important kinds of programs that promote inclusion at least in human subjects research. And yet there have been a lot of changes. In the last year, or less than a year, grants and programs focused on DEI and related topics were terminated. Requirements for addressing diversity have been removed and are no longer considered in any funding decisions. And those include the plans for enhancing diverse perspectives, diversity plans in conference grants, recruitment plans in training grants, and trainee diversity reports. Training tables have been revised to remove calculations for the percentage of underrepresented minorities, and NIH is revising the NIH policy and guidelines on the inclusion of women and minorities. So lots of things are happening in this space. In addition to the changes with respect to DEI, there have been a number of other things that I'd like to mention. One is termination of grants, some changes in the NIH budget, emphasis on gold standard science, and the unified strategy priorities. So with respect to grant terminations, many of you, I'm sure, have heard about, if not experienced, the fact that in 2025, seemingly overnight, a number of grants were terminated. And in addition to terminated grants, there were freezing of federal funds to several institutions, most notably, at least in the media, Harvard and Columbia, but others. Grants were terminated abruptly. Even sometimes the program officers were not notified until the grant was terminated. There was very little justification other than that the grant did no longer aligned with the priorities of the administration. And there was a lack of guidance, which created consternation for many, a lack of guidance about how to shut these grants overnight. Since then, this article, I'm sorry, was published in JAMA Internal Medicine just a month or so ago, which tried to quantify the number of grants that had been terminated in 2025. And they concluded that about 383 clinical trials out of 11,000 were terminated. And you can see the range of conditions that they covered, and there's lots of other data in this article. Since this time, much funding has been restored. Now, it was delayed, and because of the delay and then a subsequent lengthy government shutdown, restarting some of the grants has been really difficult for people across the board. In the meantime, many people had been let go. Some funding opportunities have been closed and have remained closed, and others have been updated to align with the agency priorities. I think in terms of research ethics, the struggle, grants get terminated for other reasons and have been for many years, but abruptly and without justification, the sort of struggle was, what do we do? What are our ethical obligations to the participants and to the data that we've already collected? And those are still being discussed. Other things that have changed our budget. So many of you probably know, but NIH is the largest public funder of biomedical research in the world, supporting research that's helped lots of people live longer, healthier lives, and building an infrastructure that drives discovery across the country, at least, but also beyond the country. The vast majority of the very large budget, $48 billion that the NIH has, goes to support research conducted at colleges, universities, academic health centers, et cetera. In 2025, the proposal for fiscal year 2026 was to cut that budget by 37%, or $19 billion, as well as to restructure the NIH, reducing the number of institutes from 27 to about 8 or 15. There were two different restructuring proposals. Luckily, Congress did not go along with that proposal, and they passed a full budget in February of 26 for fiscal year 26, which gave NIH $48 billion, 48.7, which is a slight raise over fiscal year 2025, although as people have pointed out, given inflation and all the other things, it's actually either flat or a slight decrease, but still, it's about the same as it was. Currently, I think what people are concerned about is what might happen in the future. What is the proposal going to be for fiscal year 27, both for the budget itself, but also for restructuring? And some people have noted that restructuring, even without a congressional change in terms of authorization or appropriation, has been sort of happening internally, in the sense of many leaders have been removed and lots of things have changed at NIH. Two, I think, important pieces of information that everybody might know about, and Dr. Billings mentioned this earlier, indirect costs. So indirect costs, for those of you who aren't aware, are the kinds of costs that comes with federal funding for research that fund facilities and administration. So like maintenance of research facilities and accounting and payroll and purchasing, and some research ethics as well. The rate for indirect costs is usually negotiated by the receiving institution with the federal agency from whom they get their money. They select an amount, and that pretty much covers all of their research. The estimates from 2025 were that the negotiated rates were generally between 50 and 70%, with an average of 58%. But the proposal from the government in 2025 was to reduce indirects to a flat rate of 15% across the board. Many were fearful that that kind of a cut would destabilize the country's research infrastructure, leading to layoffs, fewer opportunities for early career scientists, and a decline in U.S. scientific competitiveness. some of that happened anyway, I will say. The Massachusetts court enjoined this change, in other words, wouldn't allow it. And the bill that I mentioned a minute ago, the appropriations bill for fiscal year 26, rejected the proposal to cap indirects at 15%. That doesn't mean, again, that it won't come up again. Another change that happened in in this past year, is what's referred to as multi-year funding awards. Now, they've always been some, but there was a pivot to increase the number of multi-year funding awards. This was in the proposed budget and also OMB's priorities. Upfront obligations of funds actually has some opportunities for PIs, for principal investigators. It gives them financial stability and planning, so in security. They know they're going to get their funds for the next few years rather than relying on the annual appropriations process. But a single multi-year funding award consumes about 4 to 5 years of cash immediately. So what happens is the more multi-year funding awards are issued, the fewer grants are awarded in the same year. And in fiscal year 25 and 26, the number of awards plummeted. And this was a report from ACT NIH. In fact, NCI said that the pay lines for awards was at a historic low at 4 percentiles, leaving many, many good proposals, unawarded, unfunded. Another thing that's happened in very recently is NIH being very public about their shift towards gold standard science. And this is not just NIH, but it's across the government. In fact, there's a White House website that talks about gold standard science, and FDA does, and NSF, everybody's talking about it. I think the interesting question, you can see the 9 tenets of what gold standard science means in that box on the right-hand side of the slide. I think from my perspective, the question is, who would be against gold standard science? That's one question. And the second is it really a shift? One of the former NIH directors said, does that imply that we were not doing gold standard science in the past? And I think that's a question for all of us to be thinking about. NIH has also shifted its priorities, and you can find these. I did not put the whole list on this slide, but the statement is, through the Gold Standard Science Executive Order and the Make America Healthy Again report, the NIH has chosen a list of about 13 priorities for research going forward. And you can see that some of them on this slide are ones that I've maybe already referred to in one way or another, or you've heard about in the news. The important thing is that all applications, proposals, initiatives that NIH is going to do will be reviewed for alignment with these priorities. And they've also made shifts in the processes of review. There will be more centralized review than there ever has been in the past. FDA has also announced new priorities. You can see them on this slide. They were announced in this JAMA article in August of 2025. And what they say is that these priorities incorporate 2 guiding principles: gold standard science and common sense, with a focus on fresh ideas to address root causes, but also develop innovative approaches to accelerate drug development and approval. And there have been some shifts. Their priority has been, modernizing processes to try to reduce cost and time. One of the shifts that I think is important for research ethics is the one listed on this slide: single study requirement. So instead of 2, only 1 pivotal trial will be needed to meet regulatory requirements to show safety and efficacy for approval in most cases. That means that 1 pivotal trial has to be pretty darn good, because there will not be a replication of it. They're also committing to rapid drug assessments of 1 month if the particular intervention serves a national interest. So these are interesting changes in FDA, and there are a number of other changes that FDA has announced as well. What do these shifting priorities mean for research ethics? And this is just a set of ideas from me. I'm going to hear from others on the other panels about all of this, I'm sure. I think we need to be continually committed to socially valuable and rigorous research and to inclusion and representation in research. We need dedicated scientists, science administrators, HRPPs, journal editors, and others. We are glad to have, so far anyway, congressional support for the NIH, CDC, and FDA. There's a number of legislative initiatives being proposed. There's one, Follow the Science Act, that Diane DeGette from Colorado has proposed with, I believe, 39 co-sponsors, which is a set of ideas to reduce politicization in science. We need to continue education and training for researchers and teams and HRPP members to understand these changes, these shifts, and we need to think about alternate sources of funding besides federal funding. I know a number of states are thinking about setting up state mechanisms for research funding. The last thing I want to just briefly touch on is shifts in public trust in science, because I think this affects research ethics as well. Although the evidence is limited, evidence that does exist shows that populations around the world, not just in the United States, but around the world, have generally positive attitudes towards science, support public funding for scientific research, and have an overall high level of trust in science and scientists. So that's the good news. Although this has been generally stable over time, trust has declined since the pandemic. And I'll show you a chart on the next slide. But in addition to that, there have been increasing number of attacks on scientists, on public health officials, on clinicians and other practitioners. And this has been very disturbing to a lot of people. This is a study that was done by the Civic Health and Institutions Project, where they looked at changes in trust in science and medicine since 2020. And you can see the difference between hospitals, doctors, scientists, and researchers, and pharmaceutical companies in the CDC. So scientists and researchers are the green line, and certainly since the pandemic, trust has gone down. The conclusion that they come to is that trust in scientists and researchers declined from 58% in April of 2020 to 36% in April of 2025. So that's a pretty significant decline. At the same time, and this is a survey that's done by the Pew Research Center and that was conducted in October of 2025, scientists are still earning the trust of the public more than many other groups of people. So despite the decrease in trust, scientists are still at the top, above the military, the police, public school principals, et cetera, you can see. So I think that's a positive sign that that institution is still trusted a little bit more. So what are the implications of this? Most people still trust scientists to act in the public interests, therefore we have to support that. Research ethics can help to build and maintain trust. And all of us involved in research and research ethics should strive to stay true to our values and purpose, be as informed as possible, reframe when necessary without losing the essence of our values or integrity, engage in civil discussion and debate, and work together. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Francis.
Our next speaker we'll move right into is Dr. Kirsten Bibbins-Domingo. Dr. Bibbins-Domingo is the Lee Goldman, MD, Endowed Professor of Medicine and Professor of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the University of California, San Francisco. She is also editor and chief of the JAMA magazine and the JAMA network. And Dr. Bibbins-Domingo is a general internist, cardiovascular disease epidemiologist, and a national leader in prevention and interventions to address health disparities. In that vein, she co-founded the UCSF Center for Vulnerable Populations at the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital, which conducts research to increase health equity and reduce health disparities in at-risk populations. Dr. Bibbins Domingo was a member of the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force from 2010 to 2017, leading that task force as the vice chair and chair 2014 to 2017. She's also a member of the American Society for Clinical Investigation, Association of American Physicians, National Academy of Medicine, and American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She has no relevant disclosures. Dr. Bibbins Domingo, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us this morning, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate, and congratulations on this important convening to discuss research ethics, which are so critical. I'm going to give you the perspective from the journals and to touch on a few points related to advancing the goals of research ethics from the journal perspective, and then commenting, of course, on the current landscape that we are in. Um, Okay, how do I? All right. So I first want to remind you that what journals can do to promote the conduct of ethical research and what journals can't do, and where we must work in partnership with others. I have on the slide here the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. This is a group that convenes and issues guidance on the way journals should conduct themselves with regard to their own internal processes, with regards to reporting standards, highlights the recommendations from others, and really has set the standard and is adopted by the explosion of journals that exist around the world for ethical reporting. Journals, I want to acknowledge, though, are the last line. So by the time a study reaches a journal, the study has already been conducted. And I think that's important to remember because what journals can do, and obviously there are a set of things about the ethical reporting of research, but what journals can do to promote the ethical conduct of research is it is important, but is limited because we are only the last line. Things have already been finished by the time they get to us. When it works well, I think it's because now it is very difficult to get a study published if it hasn't met the institutional review board standing. So if a paper comes to us, we look for the reporting of what the IRB has said in the conduct of this research. The same is true for the registration of clinical trials. That would be a great example that because journals require the registration of clinical trials, that reinforces all of the other work that has been done to make sure that investigators do register their trials, that there's complete reporting of outcomes and things like that. It is harder to do, though, for journals to be the leading edge of any movement to try to reinforce a certain ethical standard. The example would be here. We all are very interested in data sharing, and many have asked the journals to require data sharing as a standard before they will publish something. But because as a community of researchers across the vast array of medical research that's conducted, we don't have uniform acceptance of the ways in which data should be shared, the types of platforms for data sharing. There's variation across different fields. Journals cannot be say we will not publish unless you have shared your data because across the array of fields that JAMA will be publishing, for example, there aren't standards for doing that. There is an infrastructure to support that. And so what we do is we encourage data sharing. We allow authors to report their commitment to data sharing and how they intend to do that in compliance with the NIH guidance, for example. But the requirement can't really come from the journals without some other commitment from the academic communities, the funders, and everything that's part of the biomedical community in order to reinforce this. The other limitation that journals have is that we do not have we don't have a vast mechanism to investigate and to enforce any compliance with sort of deviation from standards here. And this is where we really do have to work in partnership with academic communities who do have more mechanisms to understand where there has been some lapse in the standard conduct of research. Um, and uh, and uh, and so we have to work in partnership. It is oftentimes the journals that receive, because we are the public reporting of a scientific study, that will receive the first concerns from others in the academic community that a study might not have been conducted well, might not have been conducted with the highest standards across a vast array of dimensions. And certainly we do our due diligence both in the process and in investigating these concerns as they are raised and come to the attention of journals. But in most cases, we have to do this in partnership with academic communities. And I think this is an important for us to know. And I think you'll see this as a recurring theme. So let's talk now about the landscape that we're in right now. And I'm going to start with just acknowledging, as Dr. Grady talked about the federal landscape. That is of course one of the many ways in which the shifting landscape, as it's been described here, is really affecting how we conduct research, what we will do in the future. And I will remember now a year ago, right at this time, around February, we were quite concerned, just looking from the lens of JAMA editors about what we were seeing. The executive orders, the very specific attacks on academic institutions, we were already starting to see, from our perspective on papers that were coming to us, that this was going to have an effect on science in the U.S. And I think probably most shocking to us was that we were starting to get authors retracting papers, withdrawing papers, I should say, not retracting, withdrawing papers, saying they didn't want a study to be published because they were concerned it was in violation of an executive order. We had calls from people who were not authors, but were in positions of authority over the authors saying, you have to withdraw this paper. And that's something, and we also saw a decline in certain numbers of papers that were coming to us. And I think I have to say that as the editor-in-chief of JAMA, you never think you'll be in the position to actually have to tell authors that they should submit papers to your journal. And you can imagine if JAMA is in that position to do that, that's something that the community at large was experiencing. And so this was an editorial that all of the editors-in-chief of our 13 journal network came together to publish, basically saying, reminding the scientific community that we do have an ethical responsibility to conduct science. We have an ethical responsibility to the participants in those studies to actually report on the science, and that remains true, and that even in an environment where there might be shifting mandates, there might be shifting requirements about language, that the way the scientific process works is that we have to publish our findings, and then we have to debate the merits of the findings, debate the implications of the findings, and that we as journals were very willing and actually wanted to encourage the academic community to continue with this obligation that we have to the scientific process, to the participants who participate in our studies, and to the goals that we all have to use research to advance the health of the public. We also, in this editorial, reaffirmed that we're very willing to work with authors. We understand when there are orders, when there are specific funder mandates and requirements, that we might have to make adjustments, but that the most important thing for the ethical conduct of research is the full reporting of the research, and that we can work with authors to work around language requirements and other types of things to make sure that the core elements of a scientific finding are actually fully reported. I'm pleased to say that as Dr. Grady has already pointed out, that there has been a strong reaffirmation, I think, amongst many at the federal level in the importance of funding science. And I think that has given us a lot of encouragement in this environment. And certainly, what we see right now is that submissions to the journals are up and very strong. And I'm hoping that this early period is something that we won't see again. But as you'll see at the end, I do remain somewhat concerned. Um, uh, Another way in which we have experienced the current environment is with the direct attack on journals, and this usually comes within the standards of gold standard science and questioning whether journals are really in journal the editorial process, the peer review process, the conflicts of interest process that all medical journals have in place isn't perfect. But the idea that we would abandon journals or that we would require federally funded research only to be published in some federally funded journal it is sort of antithetical to the scientific process. And this is an editorial that I authored with the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine to remind both the academic community as well as the broader lay audience that independent journals do play a role in the scientific process. The independence of scientists who don't have a stake in the research voicing their critiques on a research study is actually essential to the process. And the both the peer review process and the editorial process that comments on the critiques of a particular study is the way in which we advance the scientific process. And for that to be independent is actually essential. And while we are always trying to improve both the peer and the editorial process, as well as managing the conflicts of interest, the idea that a single entity would be publishing and the arbiter of publishing quality scientific findings is not compatible with most of the principles that we have in the scientific process. And so these are areas that we are looking at, we are constantly monitoring, but these are areas that are of concern to us just from the reporting standards and how they've played out in many of the new initiatives that we see with this administration. Here are some specific issues that I want to keep on the front burner, and Dr. Grady alluded to a few of these. It is not, of course, just the federal landscape that I think is both creating opportunities and challenges during this time. The first I would just say is in artificial intelligence, and we could do an entire talk on artificial intelligence. I know that last year you had an entire day on artificial intelligence, so I am not going to talk about the many ways in which artificial intelligence both creates opportunities and creates potential challenges for research ethics. I will say that from the perspective of our journals, we are very bullish on AI. We believe that AI is an important technology that is actually works in many ways to democratize research. That it works in many ways, the way Dr. Grady describes, to accelerate the types of research that we're able to do. We are thinking about it from our own processes internally, how we can use the power in these tools to advance some of the goals that we have internally as well. We know that, the very simple example that if I want to be open to the best science across the globe, people whose first language is not English are always disadvantaged when they send a draft to me. But we know that the quality of the first draft submissions from people who are not native English speakers has dramatically improved, in part because of the technology that we have here. But what I want to speak to is not the very extreme cases of fraud that are looming on the horizon, which I think we'll see in the future, but the more mundane. And that is that these tools are now being used by many, I might even say most authors, We see a very low rate of disclosure in use, and on a very regular basis are catching people when we discover this. And so I think the standards among the general community in disclosure or in effective use of these tools is not high. And so I worry about that we have lost the ability to recognize what it means to disclose, what human intelligence contributes to a study, and what artificial intelligence contributes. We've lost the ability as a group to know how to use these tools well. And so what we see in terms of hallucinations or hallucinated citations or advancing article types for which the author doesn't have the expertise to write these articles. We're seeing that on a fairly regular basis. And I would say if we are seeing that as one of a top tier journal, you can imagine across the vast array of journals that publish, there is a rampant use of this in a way that I do think threatens to erode trust in the general scientific literature. And I am quite concerned about that. And so I do think we're going to have to, not only as journals develop better tools, but also within the academic communities, develop better standards and discussion about how to use these tools effectively. The second I would want to point out is just my ongoing concern about the nature of health disparities research. I routinely now, even though, as I said, submissions are up, submissions that are related to health disparities across our journals are down. And when I say health disparities, I would say this is any type of research that explores variation in processes or outcomes by any other type of human characteristic. So this is very broad. And when I go and I speak at academic institutions, I routinely hear people say, well, we are going to delay doing reporting on or doing aim number 2, which was to explore the variation across whatever. And I worry about this because this, at this point, is as much about self-censorship, self-protection, as it is about someone saying you should not do aim 2 because it is a funded grant. And I do think we all have to be very alert to the high degree of self-censorship that's going on, certainly in the name of self-preservation or preservation of our institutions. But we have a responsibility to conduct this research and to report this research. And I do believe there are ways that we need to encourage the continuity of this type of research. So just very quickly to say my take-home points, how, from my perspective, advancing in a shifting landscape, we have to stay grounded by going back to first principles. That's what it means when something is shifting around you. That's what we have to do. The rules and the small tools that we've used to rely on to say this is what ethical research looks like, those are going to be upended in an environment of shifting landscape. But going back to first principle allows us to get back to what is true and what we need to always advance in order to further the goals that we have. We have to look for partnership to advance these goals. And I believe Dr. Grady also said this. This is not something that any one entity in the biomedical enterprise can do. This is something we have to do together. And then I want to say we have to be willing to take some risks in this environment. I'm very concerned that the degree of caution and self-censorship is something we have to be vigilant on, and we have to be willing to take some risk to advance the principles that we have and the goals that we share. I'm going to stop.
Great. Thank you so much to each of our panelists. We have 7 minutes for questions, so we'll be able to take just a couple, and I want to dive right into them. One of the consequences of the shift, Dr. Grady, that you mentioned, shifts in federal priorities, seems to be that we're going to have more privately supported work. And one of the questions gets to this. So I want to ask it, but I want to add one of my questions as well. There are at least 2 contexts in which this could come up. One would be university researchers now being funded more than they were previously by private companies. And the second is research that now happens entirely outside of academia, where university professors or others say, I'm leaving academia, we're going to do everything outside of that context. So I'm wondering if both of you could comment on those two. And I'll read the question about that first context, which is this. One issue we're seeing in AI ethics research is that if we're studying something the government won't fund, such as algorithmic racial bias, uh, we need to seek outside funding, which might come from Silicon Valley AI affiliated companies. This brings with it its own ethical concerns. What kind of efforts might we support to curtail conflicts of interest and research biased by funding? So that part, and then what if the research is done entirely out of the academic environment as well? What research ethic guidelines are there? And I've opened that to both of you.
Well, I can start, and I think I love the comment that Dr. Domingo just said about stay grounded in first principles. I mean, I think regardless of who's funding the research, if we believe that research ethics makes sense and that we know what the first principles are about how to do good, responsible, ethical research, we should stick to them no matter what the funding source is. Now, we live in a world where, in the United States anyway, where the rules vary depending on who's funding. So that's sort of a problematic regulatory structure, but it doesn't mean that the principles are different from one place to the other. So I think that's where you start. You know, other sources of funding are opportunities. I think the opportunity should be taken advantage of when it makes sense, but the attention to the threat of it offering other kinds of problematic conflicts or restrictions or I don't know, challenges. I think that's just where we have to focus.
Let me add, Dr. Domingo, did you want to comment on that
No,
or?
I
Okay.
I totally agree, and I think we have to look in this environment at alternative sources, and I think that from the journal's perspective, what we want is just full disclosure, and I think that's the most important thing is full disclosure in this environment. It allows us to think about what steps you need to take to mitigate risk or to ensure that the first principles are upheld. But yes, we're all on board with that as long as we have full disclosure.
Great, thank you. All right, so let me, I will probably have to end with this question, but it's the top voted question and it's relevant, I think, for many on this call from an anonymous attendee. What role, if any, can universities play in counteracting the politicized, destructive policies that are a threat to our national research infrastructure and public health? I've given you all of 2 minutes to answer that
Do
question, but maybe at a high level, what role do you see for universities?
you want to start, Carson?
Um, I just came back from UCSF and our School of Medicine retreat, and I think during the time when universities feel under attack, it's hard to say that universities they're still the keepers of a lot of what we're talking about here, and I would like universities to remain positive in the way that they support their researchers and whatever type of research has to be done because it has to continue. And so I mean I think it's a privilege to be a faculty member at a university to do research. And I would like the universities to realize that they are the keepers and to support in this environment when I know everyone feels under attack too, because they have to continue to make sure that work gets done. And so I would like just work of any type to continue to get done in a positive way.
Yeah. I would just add that I think, universities should be careful about, as we all should, about preemptive censoring, as was discussed, that that the environment has been a little bit angsty in the last year. And so worrying about words and worrying about topics, I think it comes with the territory, but we have to really be um, aware of that and thoughtful about how and when we change words or change topics or whatever. I mean, those are really important decisions. And I think university communities can support each other in the university setting to sort of make those kinds of decisions. That would be very helpful.
I'm glad you mentioned that. If we had more time, I think that would be ripe for further discussion of when strategy calls for negotiation and modifications of words, and when it cuts to the bone and you say, no, I'm taking a stand for these things. But
Yeah.
that will have to wait until our next
Mhm.
conference. I want to thank Dr. Grady, Dr. Benjamingo, all of you for great questions, but you especially for your insights. And I now turn it over, on time, Professor Wolf, credit us, to Dr. colleague, Dr. Melissa Geller, who will moderate the next session on new challenges in research ethics oversight. Where do IRBs go from here? Thank you again to our panelists. Thanks to everyone for a great start.